Hi, Dave here, and today I'm going to give you a tour of the Unitron satellite telescope. This telescope had its origins back around 1957. Some of you who are history buffs will know that about that time the Russians launched a satellite called the Sputnik satellite into orbit around the Earth. And the Sputnik satellite was revolutionary, and it was the first orbiting artificial moon in history, and it was a very big deal. So it was quite shocking to the United States, to those of us in elementary school. I was about 10 years old, and I remember reading about it in my weekly reader. The Russians have launched an artificial moon. And we didn't really know what a satellite was. We didn't know what that meant. Well, the American response to that was, first of all, to be a little bit concerned. This was the time of the Cold War, and the Russians were showing that they had a very large dominance in terms of the ability to get things into outer space. So there was a large concerted movement on the part of the United States to catch up, which resulted finally about 13 years later or so in our landing on the moon. Anyway, this is part of that era, so it's a little bit of history. And at that time, many kids and adults became very interested in watching as these artificial moons would go across the sky. So it was a big deal to find one, to see one, and to be able to spot it and track it carefully. Remember, this is the era before we had space radar systems and so forth. So our ability to track these things was dependent upon our ability to find them, to see them with our eyes. And thus, this kind of telescope. Now, Unitron being Unitron, it's the highest quality, best quality possible that you could devise for such a telescope. These were sometimes called Project Moonwatch telescopes. This is called a satellite telescope for that reason. And the United States developed a program where people would go out at night and see if they could find this thing, calibrate exactly where it was. So the idea here was that this telescope could aim up and down and in azimuth, so it would sight in altitude and azimuth. And when it found the item, when you found the item through the telescope, the satellite, you could write down the coordinates. And I'll show you close-ups. These circles are not exactly setting circles, but they give you a pretty precise measurement for the altitude and the azimuth down here. This telescope could set up and level. It even has two levels, leveling screws for precise leveling. The telescope, when it was new, probably had a crosshair in it. It doesn't have a crosshair anymore. I don't know what happened. When I got it, it probably had been removed a long time ago. So it's got a 50mm aperture, a gigantic Erfel eyepiece. This is the way you focus the telescope right here. And also it's got this. You turn the eyepiece, and that's moving it closer and farther. And probably what the situation was is there's a crosshair. It's been removed at some point, and you would use this to focus on the crosshair, and then this to focus on outer space. Okay, this is a close-up of the satellite telescope. You can probably see the very precise markings on the altitude indicator here. So as this moves, you can pretty precisely determine what the altitude is. Also, if you'll notice, there's a pointer here, and once you have this set up, you can tell which direction you're pointed, north, south, east, and west, in terms of degrees, pretty precisely. And of course, I think you can probably see in the picture, you can see the levels and the leveling screws. Here's an even better close-up view of the altitude and azimuth dials. I don't know whether to call them setting circles or not. Maybe not. Anyhow, you can see how precise they are, well made. It would be nice to be able to compare this to a satellite telescope so-called by another maker, and you would see that this is by far more robust and more precise than anything else made by other manufacturers of the era. So this is the Unitron satellite telescope, a wonderful little example of 50 years or more old technology. Thank you.